we're dealing with someone in the White House who is just firing stuff off and completely controlling narratives by doing that. We can't be the sort of nerds in the corner who are like spending all of our time, putting together the documents and making sure it's so perfectly polished. Like, we got to go. We got to fight.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to At Our Table. I'm your host, Jaime Harrison. In modern politics, campaigns are not fought only on debate stages or through television ads. They're fought in feeds, in group chats, and in the fast-moving world of social media, where narratives can change in minutes. During the 2024 presidential campaign, one of the most talked about digital operations in politics was Kamala HQ, the online hub built to amplify Vice President Kamala Harris and reach millions of voters. Two of the people at the center of that effort are with us today. Parker Butler led the campaign's digital rapid response operation, shaping how the campaign responded to the news cycle. Kapp led the campaign's TikTok strategy, building one of the most watched political presences on the platform. Now, the two of them are launching a new project called Headquarters, an effort to build permanent digital infrastructure instead of letting those networks disappear after the election. So today, we're going to talk about the origin of Kamala HQ, what it was really like running a digital war room during a presidential campaign, what it felt like when the campaign ended, and what the future of progressive organizing online might look like. Parker, Lauren, welcome to At Our Table.
Thanks for
Thank
having
you
us.
for having us. Thank you.
Well, let me tell you, it's so good to have you both on. Really excited about this conversation. I want you all to take us back to the beginning. How did Kamala HQ come to life, and what role did each of you play in building it from the ground up?
Sure, I can start us off here. So, as you mentioned in the intro, I was the director of digital rapid response on the campaign. And what that means is basically, my job was to do a lot of the kind of blocking and tackling online when it comes to dealing with Republicans and really kind of driving narratives online. As we know, the internet can be a crazy place. And so, we needed an operation that could really be at the forefront of handling that for the campaign. So it initially started as Biden HQ. Right. And so the goal, early on, when President Biden was still in the race, was to essentially take the fight to Donald Trump. Donald Trump was running a campaign that never ended, essentially. He never stopped campaigning from the moment he came down the escalator in 2015. And so we needed an operation that could compete with that. I'm sure you remember, Jaime, Dark Brandon,
Yep.
back then, it was really about like sort of taking the fight directly to him. So that was kind of the idea behind Biden HQ. And then it became obviously Kamala HQ. And that sort of evolved into this, even more, even bigger operation that really was not only about taking on Republicans, but also kind of providing an outlet for young people to feel like they have a place in the campaign. It really sort of caught the sort of cultural energy online that I think really excited a lot of young folks. And we were really excited by that. And so, it really took on a life of its own.
So, Parker, you were leading the digital rapid response, and Lauren, you were leading TikTok strategy, right?
Yes, that is correct. So Parker and I both started our careers at the DNC under your leadership, Jaime. And I launched the DNC's TikTok during the 2022 midterm cycle. And then eventually I was embedded into the Biden HQ team, which was the rapid response team at the DNC, which eventually became the Kamala HQ team. So to Parker's earlier point, during that day in July, the amount of momentum that we saw during the ticket transition was really centered online. The vice president went from having 0 followers on TikTok, and we launched her TikTok page, and in less than 24 hours, she was having millions and millions of followers following not only her personal account, but the team Kamala HQ account that we were managing.
Which is absolutely amazing. And one, it was amazing how quickly you all were able to do the switch, and I call that day the switch. To do the switch and the online presence, I mean, it was like nothing I'd ever seen before. And so how did you all feel in that moment? Like just witness, your following numbers just skyrocket, go from 0 to millions over the course of just a few hours.
Yeah, it was unbelievable. I mean, this was something that, we had been on the campaign before the switch, as you say, and, I think it really sort of captured this lightning in a bottle moment, for the country, and that's because of the vice president, right? I mean, she really ran a campaign that was rooted in joy, and it was rooted in this sort of excitement and this belief in what our country can be. And one thing that always sticks with me is that she always says, we may not have won this, but do not forget those 107 days. Do not forget the energy that you felt in that time. And I think that's something that Lauren and I carry with us is that obviously we didn't win that fight, but I think it unlocked something in a lot of folks. And as Lauren mentioned, that was really an online first sort of feeling. The TikTok was kind of the by far the most followed platform for Kamala HQ, and that's Gen Z, that's young people, and so everything from sort of Brat Summer to so many other sort of like cultural kind of moments, that took place online, and I think that was kind of unprecedented in a lot of ways for a presidential campaign.
Yeah, and it was such a unique opportunity in a way to kind of reintroduce the vice president to the country and have this account be like the fun sister account to her principal account where we're able to pull all of these amazing moments from her career while also continuously follow her on the campaign trail.
Well, now there's a stark difference between Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, and just in terms of the types of candidates they are. They're from different generations. They approach politics in different ways. They share similar values in many ways. So, you all were preparing for Joe Biden. You now have Kamala Harris. Um, Describe for folks who only watched this from the outside, but internally, were there restrictor plates that were on you in terms of what you could do for Joe Biden? Were you given more freedom in terms of what you could do for Kamala Harris? What was like the internal pressure and direction that you all received in terms of, again, two politicians with two different styles in terms of their approach and how they interact with the general public?
Well, I think a lot of the principles of Biden HQ were applied to Kamala HQ in terms
Mhm.
of formats. Like, I definitely see the Biden HQ era almost as like us figuring out and experimenting on the formats that we knew were going to perform well on the Kamala HQ account. And then we just kind of ran with it during those 107 days. And I also think that there was just a huge surge in excitement for the vice president. And we were seeing that online on a daily basis. There were people tagging us, whether they were at rallies or phone banking for her or canvassing for her. You could feel this new sense of like an entire generation of people finally being really interested and tapped into politics in a way that wasn't necessarily happening before the switch.
Parker, can you give us a little insight into what did a typical day actually look like behind the scenes for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say because there was never, a dull day on the campaign, and it was never an identical day. That was obviously an a remarkable election cycle just in terms of the amount of historical events that took place. We had a team that worked 24/7. These were Gen Z folks who uprooted their lives, and moved to Delaware, to do this work. And so we had to watch every single Trump rally from the first minute to the last minute. And they often went on, for 3+ hours. Sometimes Donald Trump would be speaking on the West Coast, so we would be up until 3 in the morning watching him. And the point of that was to find every moment that we could
Mm.
to, really, the way that politics operates now is in clips. right? And so we had a clipping strategy. We kind of treated Kamala HQ as a sort of a media brand in and of itself, right? We actually uncovered a lot of things that actually, reporters didn't get to first. And so that was kind of the idea behind it is, we were trying to track every single thing that was happening on the campaign trail at all times. And we were trying to not only respond to news stories, but to create news stories. I think one example of this was Project 2025. This became like really kind of the one of the main messages of the entire campaign, which is Donald Trump has this plan. It's in writing. He's going to enact it if he's elected. Obviously, we know he's now enacting it. But that actually originated from our team because we noticed that there were a lot of young people, particularly on TikTok, who were talking about this plan. And no one really in the campaign world was really paying attention to this. And we said, if you let us post about this, I think it's going to go viral. Young people in particular are very sort of untrusting of politicians. And I think that this sort of fits within that sort of message frame. And we started posting about it. We printed out pages. We highlighted aspects of it saying this is what Donald Trump is planning to do if he wins. We posted those online and it went incredibly viral, so much so that they started to pull it and they found that the Project 2025 messaging was actually the most effective messaging against Donald Trump in that race. And so it's an example of like, when you kind of have this sort of online first strategy, it can really pay off, not just online, but in so many other aspects of the campaign. And that's sort of how our day-to-day really looked like.
And Parker, that's such a good point because I don't think a lot of people understand where the focus on Project 2025 originated. So you're almost breaking news for some people right now in that this was not something that some pollster or some, think tank came up with that we needed to focus on. The origin of this being a part of the discussion to being a part of the debate came from grassroots folks talking about it online.
That's exactly right. And I think that it shows that politics is in a much different place than it used to be.
Yeah.
The thing about digital strategy, and I think this is why Lauren and I love it so much, is that it kind of democratizes the information environment. The right has been able to weaponize that to their advantage with disinformation and all sorts of horrible things. But I also think it presents an opportunity for Democratic campaigns to embrace it because that's how we're going to reach the types of voters that we need to win back in the future. You look in 2024, the kinds of voters who normally vote for Democrats but did not vote for Democrats in that election cycle, they're disproportionately young, they're disproportionately people of color, they're disproportionately men, right? These are people who are not, necessarily watching cable television or paying attention to traditional, sources of media. They're getting their information online. And I think that Democrats have got to embrace that going forward, or else we're going to continue to sort of fall behind when it comes to our messaging.
Lauren, Parker just talked about the Project 2025 as a moment in terms of online, but is there another moment for you from the campaign that something that you'll never forget? Maybe a post, a late night decision, or something that went viral that really captures what that experience was like for you?
Yeah, I would say in terms of a post that sticks out the most to me was right after the convention. Parker and I had just spent 3 days. Every single day, we were capturing content on the floor of the convention and just being the vice president's shadow of trying to package as much content as possible. And during those days, we were posting 20 plus assets a day on TikTok, and that's just one platform. So I remember flying back from Chicago to Wilmington, and it was my first day in a couple of days to just like relax and like process my first convention. And I was thinking about TikTok trends and just, okay, we're done with the convention, but the posting has to continue. We have to continue to amplify the vice president. And I ended up sending an asset to Parker. It was basically this rainbow photograph of a like animated dolphin. And it had an audio from this artist named Zara Larsson that was going viral on the platform at this time. And I basically just put a lot of text about Donald Trump's connection to Project 2025 And it went so viral because not only was it a meme, but it was coming from a Democratic nominee for the president of the United States. So I think a lot of our audience was kind of caught off guard of like, whoa, I just did a double check. Like, I can't believe that Kamala HQ posted this. And that was one of those moments where it was just so cool to be posting things that my generation related to, and also how reactionary the Trump team was. It took them 6 days to post the same exact trend that we had did, kind of to diss us after we had dissed them. And I just think that that just goes to show that like our program was stronger than them. They were being very reactionary to us. And a lot of the times too, like we were beating them in terms of driving the narratives, especially when it came to Project 2025 during those 107 days.
And I think that to really solidify that point, Kamala HQ posts generated after the debate between Trump and Madam Vice President. Kamala HQ posts generated more than 45 million views on TikTok, while Trump's team had around 3.9 million. What was working in your strategy that you think the other side just was not doing?
So, taking a couple steps back, on a weekly basis, we were having to post 2 times as much as they were in order to compete with them on certain platforms. As Parker mentioned, a lot of these platforms are owned by right-wing billionaires. So Democrats have to work 3 times as hard in order to break through. And me and Parker's methodology behind this is being first and fast. You have to beat them online in order to drive these narratives, because that way you are being proactive instead of reactive online. And that's the position that we wanted the vice president to be in. And specifically for the debate, Jaime, that also was one of my favorite nights because you could feel the momentum building at HQ, and all of the endorsements that were coming through that night, namely Taylor Swift that evening, you could just like feel the country was just like, oh my gosh, like this is a big moment. And, you know, we were clipping everything that she was saying and everything that Donald Trump was saying on that stage. So volume was a really critical piece of the Kamala HQ program. And, you know, we started everything on Twitter. To Parker's point of this clipping apparatus that we were building, and then we would package it into different formats. So on TikTok, we would primarily do clip and captions and fun trends and memes. And then on a platform like Instagram, we would do, you know, like quote graphics and stuff like that to really make sure that we were packing our content for the audience that was going to be interacting with it.
Parker, do you, Lauren brought up a whole thing about the ownership of these platforms. Right? The manipulation of what is shown and who sees it and all the bots. What's the guidance that you would give to, you know, the young Parkers, the young Laurens working on Senate races right now and trying to help their candidates break through, that are working on gubernatorial races and they're trying to help them break through on social media, given that, you know, Elon Musk and all of his buddies are controlling what people see, what they hear, and who actually gets it.
Yeah, it's such a great question. I mean, you know, to your point, like it's no coincidence that right-wing billionaires are purchasing these platforms. It's because they know this is where the information is originating, the narratives that we're talking about. That's where they originate. And so, for people who are working on these campaigns, and by the way, if you're a young person, like, please get in this fight, like, get involved. Your country needs you. And if you are, you know, in your 20s, like, you are a digital native, you know, you understand these things intrinsically. Like, you have an asset for, you know, for the left, for Democrats, for progressives, that cannot be replicated by you know, folks of other generations. And so, you know, bring that with you when you join a campaign. You know, I think that being able to demonstrate success is extremely important. I think one thing that we did, you know, on the campaign, we had a very, very relaxed approvals process. Essentially, what this meant was, you know, we had a 5-minute approvals process. So we would send content, you know, to a text chain with, you know, the campaign leadership on it. And after 5 minutes, if no one objected to that content, we could post it out into the world. And what
Man,
that
we
did,
needed that at the DNC. Good Lord.
I know.
Approval process for some of my stuff was like forever, and that's why sometimes I just went rogue and did my own stuff. Like it's like I
Yeah.
can't wait for the approval process of research and comms and all.
Yes.
Like when you're in the moment, you got to be in the moment.
Exactly. And, but that's exactly right. I mean, Democratic campaigns have been so slow, I think, to catch up to what you're saying, which is like there's so many departments. It has to go through an email. Everyone has to look at it. And it's like, that is not how today's information environment works anymore.
No.
I mean, we're dealing with someone in the White House who is just firing stuff off and completely controlling narratives by doing that. We can't be the sort of nerds in the corner who are like spending all of our time, putting together the documents and making sure it's so perfectly polished. Like we got to go, we got to fight. And so, that's kind of how I think we should approach things. I think that other campaigns are starting to notice this, and I think that's really exciting. I think this year, for anyone on a Senate campaign or House campaign, like please, take that lesson of like, you cannot have these old processes in place. You need to move fast and first. And so build buy-in, with, the folks that you're working with on the campaign, show them examples of success early. And, it's sort of a snowball effect. And over time, I think you can kind of get folks to start to see, oh, actually, this is the future of communication. This is how, we need to be operating going forward.
Well, I love hearing that because I think part of our problem as a party is that we are too risk adverse. We are
Yes.
Absolutely.
way too risk averse, and everything has to be perfect before it gets out, and then it's too late. I mean, when everybody's moving on to the next thing, when you're just now approaching being able to talk about it. So it really was refreshing to see the freshness and the energy and the speed by which y'all were moving with her social media presence.
Yeah, I think a lot of Democrats are afraid of saying the wrong thing at the right time. And I don't necessarily think that that applies to today's algorithms. They're moving so quickly. People are going to forget about your singular bad tweet in 3 business days. Like it's really not that deep. And people need to realize that like these algorithms are going to keep on moving regardless of whether or not you're posting. So you got to be first, you've got to be fast, and you have to develop a program that is specific to you. You cannot copy somebody else's program and think that it's necessarily going to work. So often, Parker and I are asked, how can my candidate be like Gavin Newsom, Zoran Mamdani, Kamala Harris? You have to figure out what works for you online in order for people to resonate with it.
That's such great advice. Now, I want to go to a night that was hard for me. It's still hard for me to think about it. Election night. What was that night like for you all personally, knowing that the digital operation that you had built was suddenly coming to an end?
Yeah, I mean, it was this kind of feeling of you're running a million miles an hour and then you just stop. And
Yeah.
I think just on a personal level, just emotionally, mentally, it took a while to really process that, and to kind of get used to the fact that, okay, this is the reality that we live in now. We were in Delaware that night because we were prepared for any outcome. Right, there was a potential that there would be a recount, and we needed to do rapid response. So we were still online, but I think in that moment we kind of realized we have to stay in this fight. I think, we eventually we took the bus down to Howard University in Washington D.C. to watch the vice president's concession speech, and there was one line that she said in her speech that really stuck out to both Lauren and I, and she said, that there is an adage of history that says, "Only when it is dark enough can you see the stars." So let's be those brilliant billion stars in the sky. And I think it was that moment when Lauren and I were kind of like, we're heading to a very dark moment, but
Yep.
we have to keep this fight up because it's I mean, we have to scale this work. Like this isn't going to stop. This is not a one election thing. We have to build the infrastructure that's going to apply to campaigns decades from now. And that's kind of the work that we've been doing since then. But it was definitely a very difficult 24-hour period.
Well, and I want to transition from that and Lauren to talk about the work that you and Parker are doing now in terms of building headquarters. One of the lines from your launch announcement really stood out to me. You said that the conservatives build permanent organizing infrastructure, while progressives historically build machines that dismantle after election day. And you say what headquarters is meant to be is to end that cycle. What does that actually require in practice?
So I think this is partially us rebuilding the Kamala HQ team to being a similar size of what it was. So at its peak, we had 13 staffers that were posting onto the Kamala HQ accounts day in and day out. And that raised our following from 0 to over 8 million people who were
Mm.
incredibly locked in to the day in and day out coverage of the 2024 election. After November 5th, though, those accounts went dormant. And we had just built one of the most biggest left-leaning accounts on the internet in less than 107 days. So Parker and I knew that it was important for this account to be an asset into the progressive and pro-democracy ecosystem, because this type of work has been done on the right for years. We are behind.
Yep.
And we're not saying that headquarters is going to solve everything, but it's a positive step in the right direction. And the vice president understands the importance of rebranding these accounts so that we are able to compete with Republicans online, and we're able to hold this administration accountable instead of just having this account be inactive.
You saying that, Lauren, just reminds me of my run for the U.S. Senate, right? I went from I started my campaign, I had 200 emails, and I ended up having 5 million emails by the time I was done with my U.S. Senate race. And then when the race was done, I stopped talking to those people. Right? I stopped communicating. My emails went dark, and then it became bad, right? Because the algorithms will start to put them in the spam because people stop opening them up. And I think about how much money, how many resources are poured into helping candidates build lists and to interact with donors and to interact with activists in the party. And then when the campaign goes down, it all goes down. Wouldn't it be great if there was some repository for those lists and those emails to keep people engaged, to keep them involved? Like that energy and enthusiasm and that data should go somewhere where that it can continue to be utilized by the party, from campaign cycle to campaign cycle.
Yeah, I think we're kind of stuck in this cycle of locking in 90 days before an election and really caring about these programs. And then once we hit election day, we either complete our goal of getting elected or we lose. Yep. And these accounts are just not utilized until the next cycle. And I think the vice president is being very instrumental, not only with her commitment to these team accounts which were formerly at Kamala HQ, because she was able to utilize these accounts in a way where she couldn't say everything on her principal account that we were saying on the Kamala HQ account. And now we're seeing all of these other campaigns as we head closer into midterms that are iterating on the Kamala HQ account and have a team account for their principal that's running for office. And she's taken it a step further by saying, okay, you know what? This account has served its purpose during 2024, but now we're in a very critical midterm cycle. And the best usage for this account is for it to be a progressive news outlet. And that's exactly what she did.
So Parker, tell me about what does that mean for a progressive news outlet? What does that mean in practice? Are you amplifying candidates? Are you helping other folks grow their presence online, or are you pushing back against Trump are you amplifying the Democratic message? In practice, what does that mean for you all?
Yeah, so the answer is all the above. We very much have a more is more sort of mindset when it comes to
Mm.
content. So we don't want to, do only one thing. We want to do it all because, as Lauren mentioned before, these algorithms move quickly. So we need to be posting a crap ton day in and day out. So yes, as we head into a midterm election cycle, I think that it's really important because a lot of these campaigns, these House campaigns, these Senate campaigns, these state level campaigns that don't get nearly enough attention, and local elections for that matter, these are races that they don't have digital infrastructure. These are candidates that probably have maybe a few thousand followers at most, right? And so, how do we support those candidates?
Mm.
How can we raise the awareness of important races that aren't going to get the kind of spotlight that we enjoyed in 2024, and that some of the more key statewide races are going to get in 2026. So we want to use these accounts that have now well over 8 million followers. We want to use those accounts to uplift those races and bring attention to those races. In many ways, this is about organizing. Obviously, organizing. When people think of organizing, they think of knocking on doors and doing phone banking, and those are very important aspects of organizing. But I also think that the sort of we need to understand our media landscape as an attention economy, right? The idea of attention is a commodity. And so
Mm.
if we can direct attention to races, that's going to have downstream effects for the actual organizing on the ground. But it starts with bringing attention to these races that they wouldn't get otherwise. So we want to use these accounts to basically drive narratives. You know, um, this is kind of like this is the idea behind an online first strategy. It's not that social media is the end all be all. It's that social media can be the center of a strategy, and then fundraising flows from that, and organizing flows from that, and earned media flows from that. But if you have an online first strategy, that's how you compete first and foremost in today's media landscape.
Such a great point. What do you think is the biggest myth that Democrats still believe about social media that is actually holding the party back?
I think the biggest myth is that it's only for young people.
Mm.
Um, it we everyone of all ages gets their news now from social media, and the Democratic campaigns have not updated their structure to account for that. Communicating is talking directly to voters, and that's going to take place oftentimes online. And just in terms of, to your point, Jamie, the risk averse mindset that Democrats have, it's so far behind, and the world is kind of passing us by. We've gotta update our strategies really fast.
I think that's a great answer. I think my answer would be that Democrats think the work is done after they press post.
Yes.
That's just the beginning because you need to start analyzing and experimenting and then iterating off of what is successful. Just because you're posting and reacting to something does not mean that it's going to garner attention. You have to do something and say something that is worth people's attention. So I think that that's the biggest struggle is sometimes digital is seen as just like a box checking exercise of, okay, I posted about this.
Well,
That's not all it takes.
Lauren, there's some in our party who believe that if I say it once, I've said it, and so now I can move
Yes.
on to the next thing. And
Yes.
whereas you look at Trump, he will wear a topic out. He will literally wear it out. He will talk about it in all types of ways, at all times of day, in all forms, and he's like a dog on a bone. Whereas I feel like we are like, okay, I said something about it. Let's check that box and let's move on.
I 100% agree. It's all about message repetition
Yep.
because the methodology that Trump has is basically, I'm going to continue to repeat it until people believe it.
Yeah.
That applies to no tax on tips. That applies to being the pro-peace ticket, which is very ironic considering the state that we're currently in right now. So, he does a good job at repeating things and driving in that message until people know what he stands for.
Yeah. When we look at the progressive digital ecosystem and the platforms and influences, organizations that are getting big investments right now, because you see some podcasters or people are investing in them right now. Sometimes it feels, though, that diverse voices, particularly Black and brown, particularly women, are not always getting the same level of backing or amplification or attention. So, as you know, as someone who's spent a career trying to expand who gets a seat at the table, I wanted to get your vantage point in terms of just understanding uh, how of building this you all are building this new platform, and how do we make sure, though, that the next generation of progressive media and this digital infrastructure that is being built in the party is also reflective of the coalition that makes up our party? Because that's one of my big concerns, is that if people don't see themselves or don't hear their story or feel their experience, then and that's across the board. You know, you don't have to be a member of a community of color or something to feel that way. But if across the board, if they don't see it, then they feel like that's something for somebody else and it's not for me. What are your all's thoughts on how we make sure that we are as inclusive as possible?
Yeah, I mean, this is such an important question. One thing is, just showing people that this is a viable path to take. I think that's really a huge issue. I mean, I can, from a staffer perspective, right? Someone who's worked in Democratic campaigns, I think that Democratic staffers in general tend to come from often disproportionately Ivy League backgrounds, very elite backgrounds, and I think that that can trickle down into where how investments are made, and it's just a kind of a cultural issue. I'm from outside of Dallas, Texas. I went to K-12 public schools. My family, no one's ever worked in politics. They don't talk about politics. And I think that for a lot of people, it can be like, I didn't even realize that I could even do this type of work, you know? One thing that Lauren and I are trying to do is, at our firm that we started, Luminary, we're starting a fellowship program where we're trying to find young people who are still in school and to show them and to bring them in and say, we'll pay you and you can do this work. And, you can figure out if you think this is a viable, career path that you would enjoy, please do this because your country needs you. And I think that's something we found a lot of young people already who come from diverse backgrounds who, are now seeing like this is actually a really cool thing that I didn't even think was an opportunity that was possible. So I think it starts at that level.
So I am from a purple district in Southern California, and DC felt so far away from me. And I had no connection to Washington, DC, but I knew I was interested in politics. But in my mind, I thought my only pathway to landing a job in DC would be on the Hill. And now here I am, a couple of years into my career. I'm doing what I love. And to Parker's point, we've built this fellowship program to help garner the talent in the Democratic space. We're big believers that people should take digital seriously, and that this is an amazing career path that is just starting to get the attention that it needs. And Parker and I are really hoping to continue to support people from all across the country to be posting and creating pro-democracy content day in and day out, whether they want to stay under Luminary or potentially join a race this cycle. We're really looking forward to continuing to build up this program.
Well, it's so great that you guys have built this company, Luminary Strategies, because we need more people in this space at this time, and to be honest, campaigns and candidates need the coaching and the help to really figure out how to navigate this. If you could sit down with every Democratic candidate running in these midterms in 2026 and give them one rule for social media, what would that be?
I think the rule that I would give them is first and fast.
First and
That's
fast.
always my one-liner. You got to be first and you got to be fast when it comes to these algorithms.
I would say take a risk. It's okay. Like, get in, the water's warm. Like, don't be afraid, and do something that's worth paying attention to.
Do you all think in terms of Democratic Party outreach to young people? Any advice or guidance that you would give to our candidates as they start to think about ways in order to reach out and to get them motivated?
I would say continuing to invest in your digital program, but also going into different spaces. It's so important to break out of the bubble of your left-leaning following. So try going on different podcasts. They don't all have to be political podcasts. A lot of people are consuming their news through a cultural lens where, they're following an account where every 9 posts are about culture, but the 10th post is about politics. And it's really important to be showing up in those spaces versus solely relying on your in-house digital program.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that, Democrats often lose sight of that I think the right has been very effective at, which is understanding that politics is, in fact, downstream of culture. That, we're so political, we so focus on each election cycle. And it's like, for young people especially, culture is what's going to really get their attention and win them over. I think that's one thing we did with Kamala HQ, which is that we tapped into something that I think felt bigger than just electoral politics. There was this sort of cultural zeitgeist that was being tapped into, and I think a lot of campaigns sometimes overlook the importance of that. But if you want to reach young people, unfortunately, are often not, paying attention to the political news. So you got to reach them where they are, and you got to do it in a way that doesn't feel cringe or forced, right? But you got to get out there and do it. So don't feel like just because you talked about a progressive issue, that you think young people care about, that's enough. You got to, as Lauren said, you got to go into the spaces where they are to end up on their algorithm.
Yeah. So we got this one question from one of our subscribers or followers, and I wanted to ask you all this. So, Vice President Harris is your honorary chair emerita of headquarters, but the organization is really meant now to be much bigger than any one campaign. So, the question that we got was, if she decides to run in 2028, what happens to headquarters?
We are really focused on the 2026 midterm election cycle. So the answer is, you know, who knows? But yeah.
Well, I can understand that, but there are a lot of people who are really excited about what her plans are and what she will do next. And I know she has said she was on the podcast a few months ago, and she said that her focus is on 2026 midterms, and she'll make other decisions about the future when it's important to make those decisions. But I want to wrap up here. But one of the things we have on the show is a little tradition at our table, and it's called the Sit Your Ass Down Award. It's SYAD, and it goes to someone in politics or public life who probably should have taken a moment, paused, reflected, and maybe sat their ass down before posting something or tweeting something or opening their mouths. And so, given the internet never forgets, I imagine the digital team of headquarters might have a few nominees. So, Parker, Lauren, who gets your SYAD award this week?
Well, first I'll say I loved the vice president's answer to this, which was, "How many do I get?" Because we have plenty that we'd like to hand out. But my answer would be, everyone knows Caroline Leavitt, everyone knows Stephen Miller, they know these folks at the White House. What you might not know is, a lot of the sort of staffers who run the social media of the White House and are posting some of the, depraved things, celebrating the bombing of innocent civilians, just constantly dividing the country. My award goes to them because they have used the White House social media accounts really to divide this country in a way that I think is really not what digital strategy should be about. And they take after their leader clearly, but they are people who I think need to be called out because what they're doing is grotesque, and it's designed to stoke division in this country.
Mm. That's great nominees right there. Lauren?
Yeah, I think I gotta double down on that with
Yep.
the White House launching their TikTok this past year, the content we are constantly seeing the most heinous posts coming out of that platform, especially since the invasion of Iran. I think that the White House truly knows that these posts are not an effective method of persuasion, and they're just doing it for rage bait.
Yeah.
Instead of Donald Trump explaining his decision to invade Iran, it's just all about the shock factor. And it's specifically targeted towards young men because they're making fan cam edits and sports edits with airstrikes. It's crazy. And it definitely needs to be called out. I think that the American people know that this is very unpopular, and they're just trying to change the narrative once again.
So to the White House social media team, all of you, every single one, you all need to sit your asses down.
Yep. And we'll keep on ratioing you from headquarters too.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Well, folks, listening to both of you today, one thing really stands out. It is for a long time in Democratic politics, we've treated digital infrastructure like a campaign tool, like something we build during an election and then we pack it up when the campaign ends. But what you all are trying to do with headquarters is really something different, and that we have not seen in this party in a long time, if ever. You're trying to build something that actually lasts. And the conversation about democracy is happening online every single day, not just every 4 years, right? Not just a few months before an election. And so if progressives want to compete in that space, we cannot just show up during the campaign season. We have to show up every day, and we have to have an infrastructure where we can have that message amplified and where people can see themselves and hear their voices and their experiences. So Parker, Lauren, thank you both for the work that you are doing. Thank you for joining me today and being at our table. And I'm wishing you all great success. And of course, if there's ever anything that I can do, let me know. But the work that you all are doing right now is so important, so necessary, so critical for our party. And hopefully it's a launch pad for a lot more infrastructure on our side going forward.
Yeah. Thank
Couldn't
you for
agree
having
more.
us.
Thanks, Jamie.
And yeah, we couldn't be here without you too, Jamie. It's because of our experience at the DNC that has gotten us to where we're at under your leadership. So thank you so much.
Well, I appreciate that. And the DNC has a great digital team as well, led by my good friend Shelby.
Yeah.
They are very, very talented. And I'm glad that you all really started there. And I'm just so proud of the work that you are continuing to do right now.
Thanks, Jamie.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed today's show, please be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Follow us on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, or anywhere you find your podcasts. To be the first to know who will be at our table next, be sure to subscribe to our Substack on jamieharrison.substack.com. At Our Table with Jamie Harrison is a production of Vision Blue Media. Our founding executive producers are Jason Hyder and Jamie Harrison. Our producer is Kyle Kelly. Our content consultants are Ernie Grigg and Clay Middleton. Our digital communications are led by Lauren Brown. Nia Sansa is our social media strategist. Inez Smolansky provides production legal. Title sequence by Tom Hunt. Our theme song, Blonde Gone, is written by Dewey and published by Alibi Music Library. Special thanks to Parker Butler, Lauren Kapp, and the team at headquarters. I'm Jamie Harrison, and I look forward to another conversation at our table.